Welcome to Brampton Focus. In 2014, Jermaine Carby was shot and died at the hands of police in the streets of Brampton. After an SIU trial and a coroner's court, police were cleared of all wrongdoing. Currently, the Carby family has filed a $12 million lawsuit charging the Peel Regional Police and its chief. We are at a time of great conflict and we need to arrive at some resolution. My name is Michael A. Charbon, and next on Brampton Focus, we meet Tanya Grant, who is a cousin of Jermaine Carby. We then speak to Paul Black, who is the president of the Peel Regional Police Association. And finally, hey, Spider Jones makes a visit, and he gives us his perspective on this whole problem that we're experiencing. That's next on Brampton Focus. Welcome back to Brampton Focus. A little background quickly on Jermaine Carby. In 2011, this 33-year-old Brampton resident was a passenger in a vehicle when he was stopped by police. A white male driver, Jermaine Carby, a black male passenger. Once the police officer checked all the ID, etc. with regards to the driver, everything checked out, he asked Jermaine Carby for his identification. Jermaine did not have any tangible documentation on him, but he told the police officer what his name was. Once he investigated Jermaine Carby's name through the CPIC, which is the Canadian Police Information Center, he realized that there were two outstanding warrants in British Columbia for Jermaine Carby. As the altercation ensued, to boil it down, Jermaine Carby exited the vehicle, had a knife on him, was told to drop the knife, and unfortunately the police felt that their life was in danger, shot 7 shots, 3 of them which unfortunately felled Jermaine Carby, and he died as a result. Subsequent to that altercation, the SIU, which is a special investigations unit for Ontario, commenced an investigation, and then he cleared the police of any wrongdoing. Further to that, a coroner's inquest took place where they had 14 recommendations for police training and other recommendations with regards to altercations, but they also cleared the police in any wrongdoing. Currently, what's happening in Brampton is there is an organization called Justice for Jermaine Carby, and they have filed a $12 million lawsuit against the Peel Regional Police and Chief Evans, who is the chief of the Peel Region Police. Tanya Grant is a cousin of Jermaine Carby and is here today to speak to Justice for Jermaine Carby. Tanya, thank you so much for being here. And first of all, our condolences. The death of anybody, regardless what the circumstances on, is always a tragic event. So we appreciate you being here and coming to discuss with us. Give our folks at home a little background about Justice for Jermaine.
Well, Justice for Jermaine is a committee that I decided to start when I found out that Jermaine was murdered by the Peel Police. I felt that there was something wrong with that. I didn't really 100% believe what happened, so I did my own independent investigation alongside the SIU, and that's why I made the Justice for Jermaine Carby committee. It's made up of some people that believed that Jermaine was innocent and wanted to help prove Jermaine's innocence, and just rally within the community to let people know that this was an issue.
The Special Investigations Unit has been established by the Ontario government to investigate any police shootings or wrongdoings. The coroner inquest, which was almost a 14-day inquest, which was done where there was multiple lawyers and facts. What is it that you are saying Jermaine was innocent of that you do not believe the coroner's inquest achieved a correct decision on?
Well, I believe that Jermaine was innocent, period. I don't believe that Jermaine had a knife. I believe that the knife was planted. That shows throughout the SIU investigation. There was no knife given to them originally at the scene of the crime. A knife was given to them several hours later. Jermaine was killed at about 10:14. A knife was given over at 5:07 the next day, which makes me question if a knife was really present. And just apart from that, Jermaine was arbitrarily detained. As a passenger, it's not common practice to be questioned about your ID or to be questioned about your name. And I feel that because they did that, that was a charter violation.
He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. That was stated. If you're not wearing a seatbelt, that's an infraction. If you don't have any identification, you can either issue a ticket to the driver, or you can issue the ticket to the person who wasn't wearing a seatbelt. They asked Jermaine for his identification, and he voluntarily gave his name. So there was no infraction. If he didn't want to give his name, he didn't have to.
He didn't have to, which because he gave it showed that he was innocent and probably didn't know about these outstanding warrants that they did bring up after the fact. But for the fact that they questioned the passenger, it makes me wonder why they did that in the first place.
But that's, I mean, question the passenger. I mean, he was asked, I mean, there was the reason why they pulled over the car was it was a motor vehicle infraction. It was two men late at night driving a car that was registered to a female in Mississauga. So from an investigative standpoint, from a police proactive standpoint, they were just trying to ascertain the identity, and he gave his identity voluntarily.
It wasn't really, the reason they pulled the car over, they said that the car had a license plate. The license plate was dangling. When you see the picture of the license plate, it's fully intact. They also said that the lights of the car were off, but when you see the picture of the car, the lights are on. Jermaine told the officer that once the car was pulled over, he did take off his seatbelt, so he wasn't driving without a seatbelt. He took it off after they pulled him over. I'm not sure why they chose to question him about the seatbelt, because once a highway traffic stop is complete, a driver gives you all the necessary documents, he takes a breathalyzer test, he passes it, you have no reason to continue probing into that highway traffic stop.
Have you lost faith in our justice system? Is this where, I mean, a $12 million lawsuit, even after, like I said, the SIU and a coroner's inquest, have you lost faith in our justice system?
I've definitely lost faith in the justice system. I mean, I had to push for that coroner's inquest, and I'm happy that we had the inquest, because in the inquest, my accusations of them planting the knife was proven. The officer who picked up the knife...
Well, it really wasn't proven.
Well, he couldn't recall that he had gloves on the day he was interviewed. He had another interview.
So, therefore, do you believe then that those police officers who attended that event planted a knife? Is that what you're purporting?
I definitely believe that's what happened. If you as the officer, you can't recall if you were wearing gloves to pick up a knife to preserve evidence the day you were interviewed, a second interview happens, you still can't recall if you were wearing gloves, and then the day that you're interviewed in the coroner's inquest, you all of a sudden remember you had on black gloves because you washed off the blood with sanitizer. Who washes off blood with sanitizer? And then his sergeant, who he gave the knife to, said he had on blue gloves. So there's a discrepancy in the story. And I don't know how 2 years later you can remember that you had on gloves, and the day that you were interviewed and when it would be the most fresh in your mind, you can't recall. That draws suspicion.
Did you read the coroner's report?
Yes, I did read the coroner's report.
So how much, you spent about 5 hours with the SIU afterwards when they delivered their report when the SIU, was that not an opportunity then to ask some of those questions?
Those questions were asked, and they were pretty, they weren't transparent. There was a lot of questions that we asked that weren't answered, or they didn't have the paperwork on them. They didn't know where it was. They had to find it. Just a lot of running around.
So I got about a minute left. I want to give you a chance, Tanya, to talk to the folks at home and tell them what your perspective is and where you're going from here.
Well, from here, I'm actually studying law now because I believe that there needs to be more representation. These things can't continue happening. Carding is an issue. The police chief needs to be fired because she condones these type of actions that caused the man to lose his life that night. Jermaine left his house at 9:50 and died at 10:47 because he went to go get Burger King and he was a passenger of a car. This should have never happened. There is racial profiling in the Peel Regional Police. There is things that we need to address, and I feel that as a community we need to step up and realize that these things can't happen, and that's why I decided to make this committee, so that people can see that there was an issue and we can...
How could people get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me by either calling me at 647-633-4783. You can email me at justiceforjc0924@gmail.com, or you can contact me on Facebook, Tanya Grant.
Tanya Grant, the cousin of Jermaine Carby. When we come back, we'll be speaking to Paul Black, who is a representative for the Peel Regional Police Union and the officers that serve. My name is Michael A. Charbon. You're watching Brampton Focus. You want to come back for that. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to Brampton Focus. In our last segment, we talked to Tanya Grant. In this segment, we're going to talk to the president of the Peel Regional Police Association, Mr. Paul Black. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
You had the opportunity to see the segment that we did with Tanya regarding the Jermaine Carby incident. I mean, there's accusations that she's levied against the police of planting a knife, that there is problems and discrepancies in the story between the gloves, black, blue, blood, washing, the justification to stop them with the license plate, asking him a question. And basically, the point is she's impugned, she believes, the results that the SIU, the coroner's report, and an internal report has levied. You represent the members of the Peel Regional Police Department. You've seen the element. What is your reaction?
Well, to start with, I have seen Miss Grant speak before, and she's a very angry woman, and obviously that can be understandable, but I think LaTanya's anger is in the wrong direction. Her anger should be at her cousin, who put her family and her through a very traumatic situation, but her allegations are very serious, Michael, and two of them I'd like to address. First of all, we've heard a lot about carding and the arbitrary nature of carding. Our members have specific rules not to arbitrarily stop a member of the public. And in this situation, Mr. Carby was a passenger in a motor vehicle and was stopped by our officers who noticed he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. And at that point, Michael, they had...
but it was said, if I can just interject, it was said that when the vehicle is stopped and parked, if you take your seatbelt off, then it's not an infraction, right? Because you can say that you didn't have your seatbelt on when it's not running.
Well, the police are often lied to, and in that situation, I can't speak to what happened before the officer looked through the window, but our member saw Jermaine Carby without a seatbelt and asked him for his identification. Mm-hmm. That situation, a member not wearing a seatbelt can be issued a ticket. The other allegation that LaTanya makes is this business around the knife. Mm-hmm. The knife has been dealt with in three separate forms: by the SIU, by the coroner's report, and by our internal investigation. The knife was concluded in all circumstances to have been in the hand of Mr. Carby as he attempted to attack our officers. The knife, you know, Michael...
There has been a question that bystanders have said they didn't see a knife. There was also a question with regards to continuity of evidence. LaTanya brought up about the consistency of evidentiary continuity, as one would say. I mean...
You know, Michael, I come from a forensic background, and the knife in question that night was handled completely appropriately. It was a dark intersection at Queen and Kennedy in Brampton. Very busy intersection, and it's understandable. Some people may not have seen a knife, but it was in his hand when he fell after the shooting. It was kicked from his hand, and to avoid firemen and medical staff from trampling on the knife, it was properly bagged and secured in a police vehicle. That was done about 10 to 12 on the night in question.
What about Tanya brings up the comment about different colored gloves and some with water and washing off, and there was some discussion. I didn't read anything in the coroner's report with respect to that, though.
No, and look, our member was going through a very high-stress situation. His memory of certain details, black gloves or blue gloves, is completely understandable. The fact remains that Mr. Carby's blood, through DNA testing, was found to be on the knife when tested by the SIU.
What about the shooting aspect? I mean, there is, someone says that de-escalation, or there's been many reports about de-escalation. Was it extreme force in a situation where a man is holding a knife when it's stated in CPIC, which is the Canadian Police Information Center, that he did have mental conditions, that there were certain aspects attributed to his record that the police had access to in the vehicle that they may have had pre-knowledge of, that may have restricted their use of a firearm?
Just to your point on de-escalation, we de-escalate thousands of calls a year, and it's only these cases where lethal force is used where the public starts to question what we do. Our members acted professionally. Their lives are threatened, and at the end of this situation, Mr. Carby was shot 3 times. There may have been 7 rounds fired. He was struck with 3 rounds.
Yes.
Our training is not to shoot a gun out of the hand, is not to try and shoot someone in the kneecap. Our training is to incapacitate the threat, and that was done with Mr. Carby. So, no, it wasn't excessive. Mr. Carby was clearly still alive and taken to the hospital at the time he fell, or he may have been near death at that point, but he was such that he could be taken to the hospital to be treated.
Yeah, vital signs absent at the scene. What about this justice for Jermaine? It's $12 million. She's suing the police chief, specifically Jennifer Evans, Chief Evans, and the Peel Regional Police Department. Where do you see this going after, as I said, the SIU and the coroner's report? Where are we going now with this?
Well, it's another attempt by Ms. Grant to use justice system to gain an advantage for herself. In my mind, it's a waste of resources. We've had 3 separate investigations, SIU, our internal investigation, and the coroner's report, most importantly, that resolved those questions. And I think that, there's going to be a number of hearings during a $12 million lawsuit, but I'm quite confident that our members will be cleared outright at the end of this lawsuit as well.
So with about just under a minute left, Paul, I want to give you an opportunity, as I did too, Latanya, to be able to speak to the folks in TV land, as they would say, and tell them where you're at in this particular instance.
Our members, Michael, are out there every night to act professionally. The public pays our salaries. They expect us to act professionally. And on that night in question, Mr. Carby put the life of our officers and put the life of those around that intersection in danger. A person with a knife approaching an officer leaves us very little choice to make decisions, leaves us very little time to make decisions. And yes, Mr. Carby was shot, unfortunately, to protect the lives of our members. So in the end, in my mind, this lawsuit is without merit and will be resolved in the favor of our members.
Paul Black, the president of the Peel Regional Police Association. Paul, thank you very much for taking the time to be here, giving us the police perspective. Coming up next in our last segment, we discuss with Spider Jones, where are we at? Where are the people at? Where are we going from here? How do we resolve this? And how do we take sometimes these 2 disjointed points of view and make it work for our community? Spider Jones coming up next. My name's Michael Charbon. You're watching Brampton Focus. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to Brampton Focus. My next guest is a 3-time Golden Glove boxing champion. He was inducted in the Canadian Boxing Hall of Fame, and he has a book that's called The Darkness, Out of the Darkness. It speaks to his rise from the impoverished, gang-infested inner-city projects of Detroit and Windsor. He's also the CEO of an acclaimed nonprofit organization called Believe to Achieve. And you've probably seen him. He's an author, former CFRB radio host, and my friend, Spider Jones. Spider, thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Michael.
You saw the 2 segments, the first one with Tanya Grant, the second one with Paul Black. You see the problem that we have, something that's happening in the United States as well. What can we do to fix this, Spider? How can we mend this? How do we start to march forward to get these two forces, if you wish, to align?
Well, that's one of the big problems. As you know, I have my youth center, the Spider's Web Youth Empowerment Center, up in a low-income area in the Jane Finch, just south of there, and there is this profound mistrust between law enforcement officers and youth of color, Black, Latino, and a lot of the Muslims. And one of the things we try to do at that center is bring these people together to try to heal relationships between police officers, law enforcement, and people. And I think a lot of it has to be done when you have to start this when they're young.
But isn't there a lack of respect? There may be a lack of trust, but is there not a lack of respect? You just have to respect the police officer at the outset. It's decorum. Is that not the outset problem?
Well, but then you got to ask yourself the question: why is there such a a lot of such a profound amount of mistrust. This is something that didn't just happen. Growing up in the projects, the only time we ever saw the police officers is when they came in to get one of our brothers, one of our cousins, or something. And generally there was a lot of tension or violence involved. I'm not saying the cops weren't doing their job, because a lot of the people that I hung with were far from wearing a halo and sprouting wings. But the problem is this. Many people don't believe in the justice system anyhow.
Would you say the advent, though, of a cell phone now to be able to capture stuff like that has fundamentally changed police interaction with suspects?
Well, I think it has to. I mean, I remember the whole Rodney King thing. Like, that was the tip of the iceberg. But growing up in Detroit and in Windsor and in Toronto back in the day, before there was the social media and the cameras on the telephones, this stuff was going on all the time. And even a good cop won't deny that. There is police brutality. And when you live in the projects or you live in poor areas and you witness this day in and day out, you see the other side.
What about carding? I mean, that's a contentious issue right now.
It is very.
I mean, many say it's an investigative process. Others say it's an infringement on their rights.
Well, I'll tell you, carding is just a new trend word now, but that's been going on for years. We were stopped a lot growing up and pulled over, and many times frisked, had our car torn apart, and then we had to put it back together and go where we were going. There was a lot of smart comments made and things like that. But here's the problem with carding. It has a psychological effect on people. You may say, unless you live it, you may not understand it. To be stopped maybe 2 or 3 times, people are, pedestrians are going by and they're seeing you being questioned by the police, set up against the car. They want to know your name, where you're going, what school you go to, and all these things. I mean, I don't like it.
It's a two-way street. We have to talk about both sides, both those people who are being stopped and the police that are stopping them. What can we say? Is there an objective that we should give to both of them? Because it takes two to tango, as they say.
Well, it does. A lot of the carding goes on in high crime areas, and people have to understand, hey, a copper's job isn't easy. It's not simple.
You know what the cops say? 50% of the population are females, and not 50% of the carding objectives are females. So it's but they're just saying,
Yeah, it's pretty difficult. I can say what I think about the carding, being a black male that has been under the subject of carding since I was a young.
So I got about a minute left, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk to folks at home. What would be your advice to folks at home who are watching who saw both sides of this story?
Well, first of all, teach your young people how to respect a police officer. When you're stopped, listen. You're in a no-win situation. But the average copper, if you show them respect, they'll give it back to you. I'm not saying there ain't bad cops out there. 2 things got to happen here. If we want to build and heal, good cops got to call out bad cops. You got to find the balls to do that. And I'll tell you, Black Lives Matters and the rest of you out there, you got to call out the thugs in our neighborhoods. We got to call them out. That's how the healing starts. And I would like to progress further with this. They can reach me, SpiderJones@Rogers.com, or you can go to my website, www.SpiderJones.com. And Michael, I appreciate you taking the time out to converse on this, because this is an issue that needs to be addressed very badly.
Thank you, Spider Jones, for being here today. We really appreciate it. Thank you to Tanya Grant for being here, and of course Paul Brock, the president of the Police Union for Peel Association. The police folks in Peel. And my name is Michael A. Charbon. Thank you very much for watching Brampton Focus. We encourage you to go to bramptonfocus.ca and interact with us, and we look forward to coming back to you again. Thanks very much for watching.